Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session today on Day One Mindset and Mechanisms. My name is Krista Booth, I was going to say. I feel like I am you sometimes.
You can be me sometimes if you want to.
I'm actually Renee Banks, and I am the Director of HR. We call that PXT here at Amazon, People, Experience, and Technology, for the Global Selling Partner Services organization.
Awesome. My name is Krista Booth. I would also love to be Renee Banks many days, but I am our director of PXT for our European corporate teams. And so I will just blame any mistakes I make today on the jet lag since I flew in last night. But we're super excited to be here with you today. So thank you for taking time out of an already incredible agenda to hear what we have to say today.
So we are going to talk to you about a few of the things that make Amazon's culture really unique. And we're excited to see this many people in the room. We thought it would be an interesting topic. Full disclosure, this was Krista's idea because Krista and I used to have each other's jobs, which is maybe why I feel like I am you.
Maybe.
I think, there's a lot of stuff out there about Amazon and our culture and what makes us peculiar and unique. But there's a lot of stuff that I think maybe might be misunderstood, but really helpful things that we think that can help you run your businesses. So we hope that's why you're all here today. We want to hear your questions. There is, let me put this up here, I believe, a barcode that you can download now so you can submit your questions throughout the session today, and then we'll take those at the end.
Yep.
But we're really going to focus on three things. We're going to talk about mechanisms, we're going to talk about day one mindset, and we're going to share an example of a mechanism and tie that back to leadership principles. So we'll get into all of that a little bit more, but those are sort of the three things we're going to focus on today.
Yeah.
Can you bring back the QR code?
Yeah.
I think there's some people wanting to scan it again.
Yeah,
There we go. Give everybody a minute. Yes, so like we said, put your questions as we're talking kind of into this QR code. We've got some awesome moderators that are going to give those back to us at the end. And then when our session is finished today, we will be outside for a couple of minutes. And then if you want to learn more about mechanisms, practice, talk to us a little bit more, we do have a workshop that is also upstairs.
Upstairs, yes.
Yes.
And we hope you'll come to that because we really do want to give you an option to practice this and kind of put into play everything that you're hearing about and learning about today.
Awesome. All right, we're going. Okay. Back in 2016, we had a all-team meeting with Jeff Bezos, and we commonly talk about day one mindset, what it means to be day one. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more today. But there was an incredibly interesting question that was posed to Jeff at the time. And someone said, hey, Jeff, if every day is day one, what is day two? So maybe some of you have heard this quote already, but Jeff said that day two is stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by excruciating, painful decline, followed by death. Right, that is a mental model you will not get out of your head the rest of the day, but that is why it's only day one. So that's a bit of an extreme example of kind of why we want to have a day one mindset. But it really goes back to things like books like The Founder's Mentality, things of that nature of why we want to keep the entrepreneurial spirit that we do have. Go ahead.
So no one wants it to be day two, right? That description, pretty off-putting.
Pretty bad.
And there are plenty of Harvard Business Review articles and other things that talk about companies that have entered into this day two territory. That is something that we don't want to do. That's why we are very committed to the culture that we have at Amazon and to the mechanisms that we use and all of those things.
Yes, so day one really does require you to experiment patiently, accept failures, plant seeds, double down on what's working correctly. Amazon doesn't get it right all the time. I'm sure some of you have called seller support when it hasn't gone right for you, and have some examples of your own of things that Amazon has tried to launch that we no longer have. But this is where we do keep that day one mentality. Keeping with our experimentation, it's an important part of our culture. Failure is a really important part of our culture as well. And so as we talk today, you'll see some of these quotes from leaders that we really have leveraged to continue to build our culture, continue to build our day one mentality.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about kind of the 5 key areas that make up day one mindset. We talk a lot about mindset at Amazon. We talk a lot about mental models. Krista has already used that term. So I think that's another thing you'll notice. You'll hear us saying kind of a lot of the same things over and over again. So the first one is customer obsession. I mentioned leadership principles earlier. Probably everybody in this room knows that Amazon has a set of leadership principles that we're very committed to. Customer obsession is one of those, and it really drives everything that we do every day, whether it's an internal process, whether it's an external customer. This is something where we just have to put customers first. And that brings us back to making sure we're doing the right thing. It forces us to innovate. It forces us to continuously improve. Number 2, entrepreneurial mindset. So Krista mentioned this too. So we like to think of ourselves as the world's biggest startup, and all of you are part of that. It's pretty cool. That's difficult to do at our size and scale, which is why we use things like mechanisms. We'll talk more about that later. But we really want every Amazonian to think like an owner. We want them to take risks. We want them to fail so that they can learn from their mistakes. This is a really important part of the overall day one mentality. Next, operational excellence. And again, I think most of you would agree with this for your own business. We want to make sure that we're efficient. We want to make sure that we're optimizing cost. We want to make sure that we're constantly looking for ways to streamline operations. This is just good business, and doing it continuously and constantly inspecting it is a really important part of day one. Perpetual innovation, we talked about that too. We do think of ourselves as a startup. We all see it in the news. We experience it every day. We're constantly spinning. There are so many businesses within the Amazon business. I feel like I could work at 25 different companies or more and not feel like I'm in the same place. But with this constant of day one mindset, with this constant of our peculiar culture, and constantly innovating has allowed us to proliferate in that way. And every employee is encouraged to challenge the status quo. Every employee is encouraged to just think differently and come up with new ideas. Finally, long-term thinking. So Jeff has been very intentional about this too. We have to be thinking 2 years out, 3 years out, 10 years out, because we want this to be a company that is durable. We want it to persist. We want to be thinking, how do we want to be known 2 years from now, 5 years from now? Again, not just what do we want tomorrow. So we're going to talk a little bit more about leadership principles. I'm going to turn it over to Krista to talk about why they matter.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Renee. Let's talk about our leadership principles. These are things that you may have heard of before, you may have read about these before, but they really help us do 3 key things: incentivize, focus, and teach. These leadership principles go through a ton of scrutiny often. Our senior leadership team at an Amazon level looks at these, is very precise with each word, is looking to add to them, looking to take away from them. And there's tension within these principles. When you look at some of these leadership principles, you're like, oh, do I dive deep? Do I have bias for action? And oftentimes, even as Amazonians, we have to figure out if we are over or underutilizing some of these. Because while ownership is a great thing, sometimes you can over-own. You can get in somebody else's way in which you do that. And so it really is quite an art as you're thinking about Amazon and as you're thinking about your work on a daily basis. But of course, Amazon didn't just wake up one day and say, like, you know, these leadership principles were just handed to us. The story of our leadership principles is that as Amazon was growing, the senior leadership team at the time knew that they couldn't be everywhere. but they needed everyone to be thinking in some type of common form. We needed anchor points that no matter your role, no matter where you were, you could come back to this and help take a decision, help understand what you should be doing. And so that's why things such as hiring and developing the best, insisting on high standards, were really anchor points for every Amazonian across the company. It allowed us to scale. It allowed us to really embed our culture into everything that we did. And so as we talk through mechanisms a little bit more today, you'll see how we used both our day one mentality and then specifically these leadership principles to make sure that these mechanisms were keeping the company alive and doing what they were intended to do. So, what is a mechanism? Do we want to talk about that?
Yes, I will talk about mechanisms. I will also just underscore what you said about leadership principles. I'm curious, show of hands, who knows about the Amazon leadership principles or has heard of these things? So a decent amount. They really are foundational. And I think as you're thinking about operating your business and thinking about what are the good parts of Amazon that we could take, they really do help us get our work done. They help us make decisions. They help us break ties. They help us make good trade-offs. And they really are embedded pretty much in every day in the work that we do.
Yeah.
As our mechanisms. Another plug for the leadership principles there quickly.
No, but I think you're right? We use our leadership principles as we talk about our interview process, which we're going to talk through it a little bit. It's part of our promotion process. It's a part of just the way that we operate. I know that pre-Amazon, and I'm sure many of you have worked for companies where you had a mission that were literally like words on a wall. And it really wasn't what drove the company. But Amazon has been the only place that I've worked where the leadership principles are. And Renee and I can have a conversation, even if we didn't trade jobs, and speak the same language and understand why someone had a vantage point in that way. And so it's been a tremendous element of our culture.
As our mechanisms. So let's go a little bit deep on mechanisms. We're going to talk about a specific mechanism that we use around hiring later. And again, a plug for our workshop after this where you would have the opportunity to create a mechanism for your own business. But what is a mechanism? A mechanism is, we think of it as a virtuous cycle, a closed loop process that is constantly being iterated on and inspected and improving itself along the way. So this can show up in a number of different ways. Again, we're going to go big on the hiring process at Amazon and what makes that a mechanism and what makes it unique. But this could be applied to a bunch of different things that you're probably already doing in your business. But what it comes down to is good intentions don't work. Another Bezos quote.
Yep.
We all have good intentions. We all want the business to be successful. We all want our teams to be happy. But without mechanisms, those desires, those outputs that you want, really are just good intentions.
All right. I feel like I like all the quotes. And so we're gonna go back to another one. Jeff Wilke was a former CEO of Amazon. And kind of to the way that Renee mentioned that like mechanisms are the way that we scale, good intentions don't work. When we think about why we have them, it does go a bit back into why we also have our leadership principles. So as Jeff said, leaders use mechanisms to lead outside their direct line of sight. They use mechanisms to scale their impact and allow that impact to persist. Like that is so key, right? It is the virtuous cycle of what we do. And I know that many of you probably wear several hats within your own companies as well. And so when you're wearing several hats, you do want to know what's going on, but you also want to give your teams kind of the ability to do and lead and create. And so we're super excited to be able to talk about the way that we've been able to scale these mechanisms too.
Okay, so mechanisms, as I said, complete process. So one good way to think about a mechanism and how would I create a mechanism or how should I be thinking about that is what am I trying to do? So it starts with inputs, but ultimately it takes you to the outputs. So we'll kind of talk through each part of this. So if you want to increase your sales in a certain geography, if you want to increase sales in a certain part of your business, whatever it is, it can be helpful to start with the output and then think about, okay, what are the inputs that are going to get me there? Again, we're going to talk about the hiring process a little bit. So we would think about what are the systems and processes that we have set up to make sure that the tools, adoptions, and inspections part of this are working well. A tool, again, it can take a lot of different shapes. It can take a lot of different forms. And I see people taking pictures, which is totally fine, or video, if you want to remember this. But we will send you a lot of these resources online as well.
Yep.
And so the tool, again, that can be a bunch of different things. But what's important is that the tool is adopted. So making sure you understand who's driving this thing, but who are my key stakeholders? Who else has an interest in this? Who else can help with the outcomes of this? Making sure that it's adopted. Again, that comes down to, do I have the right people involved? Are they actually using these tools that I put in place? Are they on board with what the inputs are to get us to those outputs? These mechanisms tend to be extremely collaborative and extremely broadly used, I would say, across the organization. Everyone has a stake in everything really at Amazon because we are all in it together. But when it comes to creating a very specific mechanism for a specific output, it's important to have the tools right, the adoption right, and the all-important inspection. It doesn't really matter if you have a great process or a great tool or a great sort of online system that you've created if you're not inspecting it and you're not constantly trying to make it better and you're not getting feedback on it and you're not really paying attention to how those inputs and those outputs work together, because it will change over time. Customer behavior changes. Events happen in the world, like the solar eclipse, that change the way that people shop. There are so many different variables, and so it's important to be inspecting to make sure that you're sort of evolving with the reality of the times, both for people who are shopping, the customers, for vendors, for Amazon. Yep. Everybody's a stakeholder in this.
All right. Now I get the fun part of talking to you about the common failures. And when I say that we're going to talk through these failures, it's because we have lived them all, some of them more than once. And so we want to try to help all of you, if you are interested in putting a mechanism in place, kind of prevent that. Like I said, we are going to talk about our hiring process mechanism, but when you're thinking about, gosh, like, why does that process not work? Why do we keep having the same meeting about the same topic all the time? This is where thinking about, should I have a mechanism? And while that might sound really formal, it does become a way in which you can help your team think and scale and learn without you. Definitely a component of Amazon is working yourself, out of a role to be able to find something new. And it's a really great way to just continue to teach and scale your team. So the first common failure is unclear or misaligned outputs. As Renee said, you could have a lot of outputs, but they also need to be really specific. And so if you're trying to grow sales in a certain region, by whether it's a date, one of your specific SKUs, et cetera, having everyone aligned to that goal is super important. Because if not, and you're moving that goalpost or that finish line often, then the rest of that mechanism is going to go a bit haywire. The second one is driving adoption through personality and not levers. Now, I think we all know that and have probably heard there are many types of influence. Authority is definitely one of them. But you don't want simply the boss in the room to be the only reason that the mechanism works. You want people to believe in it. You want to have the right levers in place so that people are incentivized to follow said process. That's why we really wanted to talk about the hiring process. When you think about your business, your most important asset is your people. And so if you're putting a process in place that makes sure that when you take the investment of adding staff, that you have a strong mechanism to create buy-in, we felt like that would be something that would really resonate. The third one is to iterate and improve the inputs at the expense of the outputs. And so again, if you are trying to move many of your inputs because you're not creating the output that you want, that's totally okay. But if you're trying to manufacture whatever your inputs are, and you're moving this goalpost at the end of your cycle, like again, you're not going to have folks that are really following. You're not going to have a mechanism that is durable. The fourth one is failure to redesign as you scale. Like that's a great problem to solve, because that means that you've either achieved the goal. That could mean that you're getting so large that you now need something more to do with this. You need to break this mechanism into two pieces. You need to be able to take it in a way that is going to allow you to scale, that is going to allow your team to continue to work both with and without you. The next one is poor scoping. Again, if the team is not on the same page about where that finish line is, you are kind of doomed to fail. And I know that we are all accustomed to failing and trying again, and that is A-okay, but it's always better when you have everybody on the same page first. I know for me, when I'm walking out of a meeting and like you get agreement and people get excited about what they're going to go after, the way in which ideas flow, the way in which teams work together, it is absolutely a multiplier. And so when you scope things correctly, it absolutely makes a difference. The next one is inspection, or lacking inspection, or aiming said inspection poorly. One of the things that we like to look at Amazon is we blame process, not people. And so if you're aiming your inspection at Krista that didn't do a proper handover of her job to Renee,
She did a good job.
and you did a good job. But like that is not a proper inspection. And so you need to look at the process. And the reason that the inspections matter and the reason that iterations matter is that your variables change, right? Like how many of us can name some pretty material variables that have changed in our environment in the last 4 years? Like that has changed the way we operate. And so if you don't take the time to kind of re-inspect what's the environment in which your mechanism is working in, it's likely going to be a pretty short-lived mechanism as a whole. The last one is that the mechanism was built to reach a one-time goal. Great. So you may have built a mechanism to hit a specific, again, sales goal, SKU launch, whatever that may be. But if that mechanism only works for that one thing, you may not have built it as scalably as you want. And the reason that you want mechanisms that are built to scale and built to be replicated is so that you can teach. And so that your team is inspired to pick up that mechanism in a similar way and do it again and again to create some great results. All right. I always get very excited when we see mechanisms, but they can actually, be a bit confusing if we let them. And so I do think it's important that, again, if you want to both read about it, if you're not able to come to our workshop or hear us talk about it a bit more, we can, because we're here to help you build one as well. So let's talk about one, shall we?
Yes, I think that's a good point that you made at the end there, because hiring a great person is not the total mechanism. That's the output of the mechanism, and we'll get into this a little bit more. But we do think it's important for you to understand that goals do not equal mechanisms. Mechanisms, again, are a closed loop process that have many components that get you to a particular outcome. So again, Amazon's hiring bar and hiring process, it's pretty peculiar. Just show of hands, has anyone heard about this, the interview process? I think you can pay someone to help you get through the interview process, but there's tons of stuff available online. And so the bar, first of all, is pretty high. So what we say is we want every hire at Amazon to be 50% better than everyone else who's in that job. So we have a lot of employees at Amazon.
We do.
Almost 2 million, I don't know, more than
Yeah.
a million and a half.
More
So
than
to
that.
have people who are better than 50% of the people in the role, it's a very high bar. We also want to make sure that people who we hire have the potential for really long-term impact. We want to hire people who want to stay at Amazon, who want to contribute to the future of Amazon, the very long-term future of Amazon. So how we get there really does require a strong mechanism. So let's see. Interview loops. Let's get into some of the nitty-gritty.
Yeah. I mean, you all may have, again, heard, read, et cetera. They can be kind of funky. Like, we make people in many roles do a writing assessment. So we give people a prompt. They have to do some writing. But we also go through phone screens and things that are fairly basic. But for us, when we're interviewing folks, it's not just about what's on their resume. And it's actually a way that, as we're mentoring people, I do try to help folks understand it's not just what you did, and it's not just what you're responsible for. It's actually how you did it. And at Amazon, that is what we're doing. We're looking for builders. And so we want to understand people's thought process. We want to understand how they dealt with failure and conflict and all these pieces. And so that does take on a pretty peculiar nature when you're in an interview. And so we're going to talk through 3 of kind of some of these inputs to our mechanism structure. That is the hiring manager, stakeholders and peers, and then someone called a bar raiser. This is how we structure our loops. Now, if you looked at this slide, you would probably say, cool, that hiring manager, hence the name, is going to manage the hire. It's actually not how we work at Amazon. That bar raiser, which I'll talk about, is the individual that has the ultimate authority on whether we hire someone or not. That bar raiser may or may not know anyone else that's a part of this interview loop. That bar raiser is probably not a functional expert in the role in which we're hiring. But that bar raiser, of which I am one of them, is in a role to both ensure we have an awesome candidate experience, making sure that we have taken our leadership principles and assigned those out to the individuals in that interview loop, where we need to make sure that we are holding a really high bar. And so we all know, I have definitely been in it, when you are doing 2 and 3 jobs, that's rough. And you're like, just get me somebody. And that sometimes when you hire the wrong person is sometimes harder than not having anybody at all. And so when we do have someone who's a bar raiser, who's looking out for the betterment of Amazon, and is really looking to say, hey, from a mental model perspective, do we think this person is going to raise the bar? Hence the name bar raiser. That is their role. And so that hiring manager has to be really thoughtful. And it allows us to be really objective about the individuals that we are bringing in to do the role. And so in addition to that hiring manager, we also have peers and stakeholders. So a lot of times these could be folks that are the functional experts, an individual that's going to collaborate really closely, peers on the team, et cetera. But it's a really distinct way in which we have said, hey, as part of this mechanism, we believe objectivity is a key output that we want to deliver. And doing that and giving that responsibility to someone who is a bit more unbiased, I think, than the others that could be, is a really important element of how we do it. All right, let's talk about, when we get these people in a room, Renee, what do we talk to them about?
Yeah, so we, and Crystal will talk about this a little bit more too, but the interview questions that we use, we have a bank of questions. We call it the Amazon Interview Question Bank. Very creative name.
Very creative.
And what that is an input. That is something that we have all agreed on, that if we use these questions, that will get us to the right outputs. And we'll give you some examples of those later. Those all tie to leadership principles. So while we do some functional sort of testing or assessment of candidates, like the writing sample for certain roles, we really focus a lot on behavioral. So every single question in that Amazon Interview Question Bank is tied to a leadership principle and not a role, not a level, not anything else other than what is the situation that you were faced with? How did you deal with that situation? What was the task at hand? What action did you take? And what was the result? So the questions are really designed in a way that you can just sort of do the next click down, next click down, next click down. And they are meant to help us understand how have people reacted in certain situations, difficult situations in some cases, because we do want to hire people who, again, are not afraid to fail, who take lessons from those failures, who change the way that they operate because of it. And it's those behavioral questions that really help us get there. Now, again, those are complemented by tech assessments for a software development engineer, as an example, and other sort of functional assessments. But it's really that behavioral piece that makes sure that we're, one, embedding the culture through the leadership principles, but providing also a pretty similar experience for any candidate who comes into Amazon, because we are hiring for a certain profile.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I certainly know that Amazon is not for everyone, and that's okay. But we do believe that we want to give those that are here and who are interested in working for us a realistic job preview, right? I'm sure many of you do that in your companies today as well. And so even our hiring process is an opportunity for us to kind of show folks the ambiguity that they may be working in, to show them that we are really looking for the way that they react, not just kind of what those responsibilities would look like. So we're going to go through a couple sample interview questions. I will say that we have more than just a couple that we will give you afterwards. I believe they're going to be linked in the app to the, I think there's like a QR code or a link that is under us in the agenda. And so you'll be able to take at least one interview question from every one of our leadership principles home with you. But let's look at this first one together. So this is an example of a customer obsession interview question. Sometimes customers make unreasonable requests. Tell me about a time you had to push back or say no to a customer. What did you say or do? You could have someone that said, well, I had a customer that wanted X. I could give them X, but it was going to take me 3 days. And I knew that that's what they wanted, but they were really insistent on a timeline. And so I told them what I could do, but I also told them that, that would not be my recommendation. That's not what we would do. And so I always love a good story. And so I would probably follow up and say, well, tell me, what did they say? What was the reaction? Because I think we also want to be sure that we're getting like genuine and authentic answers. I know that there's been many interviews with folks saying like using Gen AI to generate some great answers for them. And so it's really hard to like fake an entire story. And so digging into these questions, understanding why they made the trade-offs they did, understanding how they delivered a difficult message to a customer is super important. And so in that customer obsession answer, you're going to be able to get a much better sense of how someone operates, how fast they think on their feet, how creative they are, maybe with what they're giving folks. The second one is hire and develop the best. And so as part of Amazon's approach, and I'm sure part of your approaches as well, if you're hiring someone that is going to be what we would call an individual contributor, someone that doesn't have direct reports, you're going to ask them a set of questions, and it's probably going to be pretty well based on what they themselves have done or what they would do. But when you're hiring a manager, you want them to also be an amplifier of work, right? And so when we're interviewing individuals for manager roles, we actually want to ask them like how they also get work done through others. And so this question is a good example of that. Tell me about someone you hired that you thought complemented your skills. How did you coach the individual in areas where you have a weakness? So in this question, you're going to get at a lot of different things. The first thing is you're going to understand, how do they hire, right? Break down their process. And they're like, well, I just asked for referrals from my friends, and we'll just see who shows up, right? That's going to show you how deep and how much they care about the investment that you're asking them to make. But if you talk to them about someone that complemented their skills, they have to be aware of their weaknesses, right? And so you're going to be able to understand like how vocally self-critical, how self-aware are they? And so I am not a software development engineer. And so if I was to answer, oh, well, I had to hire a software development engineer because I don't know how to code, I would probably then follow up and say, oh, that's great. You know that about yourself. You know that it's a skill that you need on your team. So that must be hard to manage and to inspect work of someone you don't know. How would you do that? And so you're able to then kind of follow up and understand, how are they going to do that? Again, tell me a really good story about how you figured this out. So these are just two examples of the way in which we think about interviews, the way we understand someone. Because again, we believe Amazon's a really great place to work. We understand that it's not for everybody, and that's okay too. And so we want to find that out as we're going through the interview process. We want other people to find out if, like, hey, I love to shop with you, but I'm gonna go down the road, and that's okay too.
The other thing that we think about with candidates, and it's again part of this overall mechanism and something that we consider because we really try to look at everything from every angle, is that candidates are customers. So whether they get hired or not, we want them to be delighted by shopping with Amazon. And so that's something that we think about too. That's, as Krista said, that's part of the role of the bar raiser is to make sure that candidates have a great experience, that they are taken care of when they're here. They know where to go. They're given a bottle of water, whatever the things are, to make them feel appreciated and respected throughout the process. A metric-related piece of that is this 2 and 5 promise that we have. And so we hold ourselves accountable to this for every single candidate who goes through the loop process. And it's that 95% of candidates know the outcome of their phone screen within 2 days or an on-site within 5 days. And so again, this ties back into that closed loop mechanism. Are we inspecting what we're doing? Are we going back? Are we holding ourselves accountable? And is this the right metric? I mean, I will say I've been here for 8.5 years, Krista much longer. And this is something that has changed a lot over time because again, we had to think about like, just because we measured it this way 2 years ago, is this still the right metric? And we want to make sure that we're constantly evolving, we're constantly doing the right thing on behalf of Amazon and on behalf of our customers, and in this case, candidates.
Yeah.